This is a gaming PC for $15,000! Well, actually, it's a server, but it used to be a server for Andre, one of my subscribers, who sent me this beast! Huge thanks to him from me and my neighbors. We're really happy. But for me, this won't be a server. It's gonna be a gaming PC! For the build, I'll need 3 power supplies and a fire hose. And we'll also compare it with the regular high-end PC featuring an RTX 4090 and an Intel i9. The specs of this machine are just mind-blowing! It's a Dell PowerEdge R660. Let's take a look under the hood. The cover comes off really easily. Just turn the screw, lift the hatch, and it's off! I'd be lying if I said this thing doesn't look powerful. 2 CPUs, 8 high-performance fans, making sure no neighbor remains indifferent. There's so much RAM here that I could build an entire RAM disk. The construction is fully modular, which makes taking it apart much easier than a regular PC. Almost no cables, just connectors. Everything fits into designated slots and guides. There are 2 power supplies, both 1400 watt platinum rated. That means plenty of room for upgrades. There's even an extra high power fan here, but I don't understand. Why is there a riser 1 and immediately riser 4? Where are risers 2 and 3? Though, who cares? The main thing is to connect the GPU. This server has 32 sticks of DDR5 RAM, which sneakily changes color when removed. Each stick is 64 gigabytes and costs $265. Multiply that by 32. You get 2 terabytes of RAM worth $8,500. After seeing these numbers, my 64 gigabyte and a regular PC feels like a joke. Which color do you prefer? I like purple. I couldn't find a clear manual on how many turns to tighten the CPU cooler screws, so I'll count manually. The mounting system here is different from a standard PC. The screws need to be tightened in a cross pattern. I counted 3 turns per screw, with some needing 3.5. Next, I need to unlock the latches, or whatever they're called in technical terms. And here comes a surprise! I removed the cooler, and the CPUs are missing! What a disgrace for this price. 4,677 pins, and not a single CPU sitting on them. The sockets are massive. Just imagine the level of vibration if CPUs were actually in place. By the way, according to my calculations, the motherboard alone costs $3,500, and it doesn't even have RGB lighting. What a budget disgrace. False alarm, the CPUs were just sneakily stuck to the heatsink, and stuck pretty well, I must say. They're held in place by a specialized plastic frame, which itself is attached to the heatsink at 4 points. Plus, the thermal paste adds extra grip. Seems like they dumped an entire bucket of it in here. It's already drying up, so I'll need to replace it. I was going to scrape off the old paste with a spatula and apply a fresh layer to prove how great of an economist I am, but not today. Whoa, these CPUs are heavy. We've got a pair of Intel Xeon Gold 6448Y, each with 32 cores and 64 threads. Price, $3,500 each. Let's delid one and see what's inside. All right, this is a tough nut to crack. Not opening that easily. Damn, why is this so hard? All right, enough playing around. There, it's open. Just a couple of scratches. Nah, just kidding. This is a bronze dummy CPU for socket 3647 that I bought for pennies. You really thought I'd delid an actual CPU like this? Now, if I had a solder under the lid, that would be a real challenge. Here's a comparison of Xeon versus CPU on socket 1151. The difference is colossal. Why are server processors so much bigger compared to regular ones? The answer is obvious. Server processors have more of everything. And I'm not just talking about core count. They have more memory channels, more PCIe lanes, support for larger RAM volumes, and so on. The small processor simply can't fit everything this one has. By the way, I got MX6 thermal paste. I have no idea which one is usually used on these CPUs. I just saw people using this one, so I bought it too. The difference from MX4 is about 1 degree Celsius, but I think this one dissipates heat better after drying compared to MX4. but that's just my guess. After a few drops of this paste on the heatsink, I realized that spreading it was impossible. But then I remembered that nothing is impossible. So I started spreading it with inhuman enthusiasm anyway. That didn't last long. Just in case, I applied some around the edges for extra security, because you can never have too much butter on your bread. Now, about installing the processor on this platform. It's actually very simple, even though at first glance it looks really complicated. Every part except the heatsink has arrows printed on it, as you can see here. So all you need to do is secure the processors in the specially trained CPU holder, making sure to follow the arrows, then attach the holder to the heatsink while also checking where the arrow on the socket is. Just imagine how the arrow on the right ends up on the left once the CPU is placed into the socket. I even pressed the CPUs down by hand to check how the thermal paste spread underneath. It spread pretty well. Everything is holding on tightly. Now it's best to wipe off fingerprints from the CPU contacts just to avoid a heart attack later when something doesn't work. By the way, these retention clips on the holder cover some contacts on the CPU, which means the processor might still function even if some pins don't have a perfect connection. Since I don't know how many turns each screw needs, I'll just tighten them the way they were before. First, tighten until resistance is felt, then 3 more turns with force. Now, imagine the level of anxiety if one of these memory modules doesn't work. How do you even find which one is faulty? So to be safe, I wiped down every RAM module with alcohol before installing it. Placing the RAM sticks is much easier than removing them, I noticed. By the way, as you may have noticed, I rarely upload videos, and that's because making content is kind of pain. First, you need to find something interesting, then negotiate the purchase, then actually buy it, then wait for it to arrive. So, if you'd like to help speed up my uploads, you can send me something for a review, just like Andre did. And it doesn't have to be anything expensive. I'm interested in rare hardware, very old tech, or, for example, top-tier PCs from past years. If you have something like that and don't mind sending it, you can reach out through my Gmail. The link can be found in the channel description. I even got an old monitor just for this server, and lost one elbow in the process. Why? Because this monitor has something that 90% of modern monitors don't, a VGA port. It's so ironic. The server costs a fortune, but apparently adding a modern port went against their religious beliefs. And in general, this thing has barely any ports. Only 3 USB ports, and not even all of them are USB 3.0. God, I suffered so much because of this. But hey, at least they managed to fit in 2 VGA ports. But let's not talk about the bad stuff. There's more of that coming ahead. This little brick, despite its modest size, weighs a whole 16 kilograms. All right, let's plug everything in and I'll show you how it works. It powers on just like a regular PC with a button, but takes way longer. Ooh, listen to that roar. Good thing something immediately pops up on the screen when it turns on. At least we know the server is working. I'll head straight into the BIOS and crank up everything set for energy efficiency to maximum performance. Actually, I came here to disable the integrated GPU because when it's enabled, the external video output on the GPU we're about to install does not work. Apparently, you can't just plug in a disk here, so I had to reinstall the system on whatever drives were already in it. Now we can turn off the server. We're about to install the gaming GPU, but first, we need to deal with the noise problem when running the server without a cover. As you probably noticed, it gets insanely loud without the cover. This is intentional to prevent the server from overheating. And for that, we have a specially trained sensor. Here it is. When you short the contacts, the server thinks the cover is in place. When the contacts open, the fans go into battle mode. As you can imagine, neither I nor my neighbors want them going into battle mode, so I'll just flip the cover to keep the airflow correct and use my still alive Bronze Xeon, which I conveniently bought as if I knew I'd need it for this purpose. The riser slot is right under the GPU, but as you can see, a fire hose is basically required to get this thing connected. Plugging it in is so convenient that I nearly broke my finger. Alright, half the work is done. What a mistake it was to think I'd never have to disassemble my PC again, but hey! Anything for science! Taking out the GPU was one thing, but removing the power supply, that's a whole different beast. It takes some serious effort. Sometimes I regret selling all the junk I buy for these videos. If I kept it, I'd have plenty of spare parts lying around. I short 2 contacts on the power supply so it turns on by itself and connect it to our undeniably gaming grade PC RTX 4090. Done! Let's power up this monster. Well, our 4090 has successfully booted up. I'll start with CPU-Z, and we can see that all the cores are fully active. No sluggish ones here. But what's not so great is the 3 GHz frequency across all cores. With such issues, our 2 CPUs score 37,000 points, which is equivalent to 2 Core i9s. Meanwhile, each processor consumes 225 watts and barely heats up, judging by the temperatures. Here are the Cinebench scores for those who are interested. RAM is insanely fast because it operates in an 8-channel mode, delivering these impressive read and write speeds. For comparison, here are the numbers from a modern PC. The difference is 3.5 times. By the way, remember when I made that video about rendering a 300 by 300K image? Well, I can confidently say I can do it again. Let's see, will we have enough RAM this time? Ah, come on. Disk is full again. Turns out you need more storage space, not more RAM for this task. About gaming. This part's really weird. For example, in Cyberpunk, both systems perform almost identically. The i9 is slightly better, but not by much. However, in other games, something very strange happened. FPS on the server was 3 times lower than on the i9 PC. I launched another well-known game and noticed that FPS on the server sometimes doubled, but after a while, it would randomly drop back to half. There's no way to predict this. Sometimes you start a game and the server almost matches the i9. Other times, you launch it again and FPS is cut in half. I think this is some kind of a motherboard glitch. Most likely there's also a conflict with the built-in non-gaming GPU, which outputs video through the VGA port. There's definitely some weird component conflict going on. I also wanted to create a RAM disk and run games from it, but because of this bug or glitch, it's hard to catch the moment when FPS behaves normally. Conclusion: even in games, the server's performance is significantly higher than modern desktop CPUs, considering that these server CPUs were running only at 3 GHz, while the i9 14900 runs at 5.3 GHz. And yet, the i9 wasn't that much faster. However, because of the bug I showed you, FPS is often half of what it could be. By the way, this socket supports processors with an unlocked multiplier, which means they can be overclocked. With overclocking in the 8-channel memory setup, you can expect 30 to 35% higher performance compared to Intel's current desktop CPUs. Even though these Intel Xeon chips use the same core architecture as Intel's 12th generation CPUs. Let me know, was this video interesting for you? And thanks for watching. See ya.